The Bengals OTA practice on Tuesday was open to the media, and there are plenty of takeaways, including who's starting at safety and why. That and more in today's episode.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and you can subscribe to this show on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast. We'll have you covered every day, although we are in off-season mode just at the moment. Today's episode brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL, and when you enter promo code LockedOnNFL, one word, they'll throw in custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumblers with every order. That's pretty cool. You can become an everydayer by subscribing. That becomes much easier when you get the notifications when we upload our content. You can become a first listener. Like I said, just as easy. Get those notifications. And James, today we're going to dive into the open OTA practice that occurred on Tuesday, where a few noteworthy things happened. One, I saw clips of Joe Burrow throwing passes without faking a handoff first. So finally, we have some evidence that the Bengals aren't going to be a 100% play action and run pass option passing team this year. And two, we got some clarification in the locker room and on the field about why Jordan Battle is getting some of those first team snaps that were tweeted about and discussed on Tuesday and actually on Monday too, because there's a clip of Jordan Battle out there with the ones on a play that the Bengals social media team put out on Monday.
First team. It's first team season. I hate it. I think you got the feeling when I was at practice that I hate, and I'm not going to name them on the pod, but I certainly know that there are people that I work with that will not hesitate to, oh man, so-and-so got a first team rep. And it's like, it's practice. Anyways, it is first team rep season. And you're right. The safety battle is certainly one of the more interesting battles and one of the only ones. I mean, there aren't many. And certainly with the uncertainty at right tackle, which we can get to Jonah coming up in a bit. He was not there, by the way, for those wondering. He was not there on Tuesday, still optional. But yeah, I think that for those that were wondering if Lou Anarumo would be willing, open, and not even just willing and open, but actually use 3 safety sets this season, because there was a lot of talk about it a year ago, right? And it didn't happen. He just believed in Jesse Bates and believed in Von Bell so much. Not that he's not going to believe in Dax Hill or Nick Scott, but Jordan Battle's in the mix. And I think that's the takeaway from Tuesday's session, is that the 3 safety looks, I think those are coming, and it might not even be 3 safeties in at once. It might just be more of a rotation, much like we talk about defensive line rotation. I think there'll just be certain packages where you see Jordan Battle and you don't necessarily see Nick Scott, certain ones where you might not see Dax Hill out there. But it would shock me if all 3 guys don't play a decent amount. And the decent part obviously has to do with Jordan Battle, because I think Dax Hill is going to get a ton of reps. I'm not, by the way, I didn't mean to say or imply that Dax won't be out there a ton. He will. But is there a scenario or a package where it's Nick Scott and Jordan Battle? That wouldn't shock me.
I feel like I would be a little bit surprised. My expectation is that Dax is an every down guy. Actually, a safety rotation period that's significant would be a bit of a surprise to me, just in general. And part of the reason, by the way, that we learned Jordan Battle is on the field with the first team on defense in these 7-on-7 drills is because Nick Scott is easing back in with the shoulder injury he said at his locker after practice. The other thing I wanted to mention, James, is, I mean, I saw Trenton Irwin out there getting first team reps, man. I saw Drew Sample getting first team reps. You want to talk about some first team reps, just because I know you hate it. I'm bringing these guys up. Those guys are out there with the ones on a couple plays.
That's not even the one that would be the most shocking, the biggest headline. You ready?
Oh, yeah.
6th round rookie receiver, Princeton graduate, Andre Yosevach catches pass with first team offense in 7-on-7 drill. We could do that. We could say, oh, because Joe Burrow did throw it was around a 7-yard pass, 8-yard pass to Andre Yosevach and completed it, boom, in 7-on-7 drills on Tuesday. It's hilarious to me because there's just so many factors, right? Are they just not wanting T. Higgins to run as many routes? Obviously, Tyler Boyd wasn't there. Like so many different things. So it is hilarious that we try to read into it. And I think the read is that they're evaluating what they have. You're right. You mentioned Nick Scott's shoulder, but that Jordan Battle gets it to this degree, right? Because there were only, I'll say this, there's field 1 and field 2. And you can say first team if you want to. I don't want to do that because you need more than 22 guys, and that's all you need for first team. More than 22 guys over there. And on field 1 with Burrow and Chase and Higgins, there were 2 rookies. And those 2 rookies were Jordan Battle and DJ Turner. So that makes sense in a way, right? Chidobe Awuzie obviously coming back from a torn ACL. And then obviously you mentioned the shoulder with Nick Scott. So it could be something, could be nothing, but I do think that there is at least some belief in Jordan Battle.
Did Charlie Jones catch a pass from Joe Burrow on Tuesday?
Nope.
Andre Yosevach ahead of Charlie Jones. Lead story. Headline, YouTube thumbnail. There's an article for you on allbengals.com.
Oh, man. Chuck Sizzle beat out by, I don't even know, Yosevach Sizzle. That's not going to work.
Nope.
Mac Hippenhammer, the undrafted kid out of Miami. He becomes Mac Sizzle. Mac Sizzle works.
Yeah. I mean.
That didn't happen either.
Coined by Gus Johnson. Chuck Sizzle. The origin story.
It sounds so much better. Like now that I know that and heard him say it, it sounds so much better than the first time I heard you say it. Shocker. You are not on his level.
I'm not Gus Johnson.
I know. Shocker.
Wow.
Really breaking news here on Locked On Bengals. First
breaking
team reps.
Hearts, not breaking news, man. Come on.
Come on, give me your Gus Johnson impression.
No, that's all right. I can't. I'm not Gus Johnson. You're right about that. Coming up next, James.
You're smarter than you look because that would have been something I would have made fun of for a long time. I tried to set you up.
Oh, I know my limitations. Coming up next, James, a whole lot more to get to out of OTAs, the open day to media, some other pieces on the offensive line to talk about. First-round rookie, Miles Murphy on special teams. Didn't mention him on the team with first teamers, although maybe that was just 7-on-7, and that's fine. We'll get into more notes from OTAs on Tuesday coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs are perfect for you, whether it's summer, like right now, and you need some shorts that are going to make you look good, feel good, be perfect in keeping you cool. Maybe you want some joggers, which I wear my Bird Dogs joggers all the time. Might be the most comfortable pair of pants I own. And I try to get by with wearing them because they are sporty, but I try to get by to wearing them to as many family dinners as I can. And that's the point with Bird Dogs is they make you look good. They are a casual feel that is comfortable. At the same time, they look good enough to where you can get by with them at classy functions. So whether you want to talk about their shorts, whether you want to look at their joggers, their pants, they have something for everyone. And all you have to do right now is go to birddogs.com/lockedonnfl to check out all of their different products. Again, that's birddogs.com/lockedonnfl and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnfl for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Again, birddogs.com/lockedonnfl.
James, we have some other notes from OTAs on Tuesday to get into. One note, Cal Adamitis in a boot. This is a minor injury note. I assume he'll be.
He was in a boot last week.
Okay. Didn't discuss that last week. Tanner Hudson, long snapping today.
I'll say this with all due respect to Cal. You're a long snapper, and it's June. Go ahead.
He'll be
fine. That's the point. He'll be fine. He was out there. He's just walking around in a boot. That's all.
Young guy. Lel Collins also present. You want to go through your attendance notes? Real quick, James, Tyler Boyd wasn't there. Jonah Williams obviously wasn't there. LC didn't practice but was present. What were the
Chidobe
others?
Awuzie
Mm-hmm.
was not there. I did not see DJ Reader either.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is optional. This is voluntary. Is the word, not optional. Voluntary. Next week is mandatory. And so that's those are the guys that were missing. But most of the guys have been there and been in attendance, and headband Joe Burrow certainly lives on. He looked good, by the way. We probably should have started there. I thought he played pretty well in 7-on-7. And there were a couple of passes that got tipped that I don't necessarily know if they were on him. Jermaine Pratt made a good play. Mike Hilton dropped what should have been an interception. But overall, I thought he looked pretty in sync with his guys, connected with Jamar on multiple passes. T. Higgins, Jamar dropped another one that would have been a nice catch. Andre Yosevash, future star, had a nice catch. So overall, I think Burrow and the offense looked pretty good.
Irv Smith in the seam as well.
Irv Smith, I forgot that one. Yeah, it was a big play.
What were the best plays for Joe Burrow?
That one, I mean, he only got, maybe 3 series total.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking 10, 12 plays. So not a lot stands out. I just named a lot of the completions. There were a couple that I probably forgetting, but he looks really good. I will say this though, and it's something that I noticed a few weeks ago, but I didn't want to come out and say. And I was talking with Joe Danneman of Fox 19, and you don't want to say it because it might just be a 1-week thing where he's off season. And this is much different than play action because it's directly regarding Joe Burrow. But Joe Danneman of Fox 19 called me over and asked me about it today. And I'm like, okay, it's not just me noticing this. He's throwing from different arm angles. Mm. And when I think of Joe Burrow, I think of a guy that wants to be set and wants to go through his mechanics. And that's just part of his game. Not that he can't go off script or anything. Of course he can. But it looks like he's working on different arm angles. And I'm curious to ask him about it. I didn't. But something that he might be working on. One of those small things he might be working on that he might not acknowledge. But clearly, it's something that he's done throughout this offseason program.
It would fit the bill, right? For the little things that he's worked on year over year, for the ways that he's been able to change his game, add tools to the toolkit, change the way that he approaches taking sacks, for example, something that changed halfway through the season when he just stopped taking sacks. And some people have noticed, some people haven't. We've talked about it quite a bit. Is one of the big pieces of Joe Burrow's evolution last year, the knowing when to get rid of the ball, where to get rid of the ball, getting rid of the ball on time, taking fewer sacks that he doesn't need to take was a switch that he really flipped last year. And so if he's adding some arm angles to his game, we've seen him working on throwing off platform. We've seen them working on bootleg stuff. We've seen them working on him rolling one way, throwing the other way, and all those sorts of plays in terms of like the play action stuff that you mentioned as well that we've seen a lot of. Today, there were some more clips of them working RPO stuff. And so wouldn't surprise me if arm angles was part of it. We did have a nitpicky critique of Joe Burrow last year that he has too many balls tipped at the line of scrimmage. And he and Justin Herbert were two of the league leaders, I think, in tipped passes, despite how tall Justin Herbert is. Both of those guys in that category, something that is part of just the offensive approach for the Bengals, I think. A lot of quick game, a lot of defensive linemen knowing when to get into passing lanes, but working on arm angles, something that can be a tool in the quarterback's toolkit in avoiding some of those bad passes. He's probably annoyed, right, that he threw so many non-turnover worthy throws last year that turned into picks because they were tipped. Mm-hmm. And he had all that batted pass luck last year because it was noteworthy.
Yeah,
he's probably annoyed with that.
Yeah, I think he was annoyed by the questions too, which that alone would probably say, all right, I need to find a way to fix this. And it is a good point because when you're Burrow and you play at his level, there's only small things you need to tweak. And it to me, I'll go with an NBA reference. It would be like if Steph Curry was suddenly getting blocked just a tad bit more than usual. And defenders were finding a way to deflect his shot. Well, it's really hard because his release is so great and all of those things, but he can shoot off platform at a crazy level and with different forms. And by the time he gets square, regardless of how he takes off from the ground, all of those things that make him the best shooter ever, literally ever. Well, that's probably what Burrow's doing is, if I'm under pressure here, or if it's a set throw, I can anticipate that a hand could go up there. So I'm going to throw from a different arm angle, because that's the problem is if defensive linemen can anticipate it and know they're not going to get to Joe and they're going quick game, which is a big part of their offense. And I still think will be, well, then they can anticipate it. But if he's throwing from a different arm angle, it might make it much harder, or make at least a little harder on defensive linemen. So that's one thing. The other is Orlando Brown getting into fools, and that offensive line winning much, much more.
That was the same transition I was about to make. One thing that could get them away from the quick game and reduce their reliance on the quick game is improving the offensive line. If they can pass block a little bit better, hold up for another 0.3 to 0.6 seconds per play, because those are really the margins we're talking about in terms of pass protection in the NFL. There was a quote from Orlando Brown earlier this week talking about the potential of Cordell Volson. We've got Jackson Carman working exclusively on the right side, and just the faintest amount of defensive line, offensive line conflict. Like nothing that you can even really discuss as pass blocking, but they touched each other a little bit. They played patty cake a little bit in the trenches on Tuesday. It wasn't anything to write home about, but Jackson Carman working exclusively on the right side. Again, as you would expect with the absences, I think, but somewhat noteworthy there.
Yeah, I think it is noteworthy just because you look at Carman, and obviously he came in at left tackle last year, but they've said how he's done both in practice. Sure. But if he's going to be a real threat in this potential competition, he's going to have to far and away, I think, blow it out of the water. Like, I think he's going to have to be dominant compared to the other two. And so to me, he would be third in the pecking order right now. And so we can get the Jonah coming up in a second. Lel was there, like you said. And overall, the offensive line, the more I think about it, I kind of getting bullish on him, Jake. Maybe it's because I don't know what good offensive line play is like, because I haven't seen it in quite some time professionally, really ever. My first full season in the Bengals locker room was 2016. And even though they had Witt and Zeitler there, that was not a great offensive line. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And last year there were signs that it could be better. And obviously Kappa was good. Karras was steady. Cordell showed some flashes, but I think that there's another step for this line. And obviously Orlando Brown Jr. is a big part of that. I talked with him. He's like the nicest guy on the planet, by the way. And I have a theory about him. One, I'll just give you a little practice insight. While the guards were doing and they were doing like left guard center, then right guard center, and they were going through drills, it wasn't the entire offensive line. Orlando Brown Jr. was on the side still taking reps on his own, just working on footwork, hand placement, things like that. I thought that was interesting. The other thing is, I think he is just so darn happy to be here and be in Cincinnati and be appreciated. And he wants to play the best ball of his career now, because I think for the first time in his career, he feels like he's valued at the level that he was hoping the whole time. Didn't feel that in Baltimore, wanted to play left tackle. Last year past couple years in Kansas City, he played left tackle, but clearly they didn't view him as a franchise left tackle. The Bengals do. And so I think he's going to give it everything he has for this organization.
Yeah, his motivation intrinsically related to his father, related to, his goal is to be a Hall of Famer. And when you have that kind of internal motivation, inherent motivation, you don't need the contract years, assuming that is, what he's really motivated by. Also noteworthy that he didn't go to the White House with the Chiefs. Said, we had to be here, didn't want to miss a day of work. But that's a pretty cool opportunity, I think, that he passed up on. You don't win the Super Bowl every year, get to go to the White House every year. He'll probably get to do it next year. But,
I love how you said that, very cocky. In his mind, I think so. I think he's like, hey, win it this year.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll just
you know who he's high on? You know who he's high on? And I'll get some clips together. He is very high on Cordell Volson. And so at some point during this show, over the next couple pods, we'll play a clip. I was able to talk with Orlando separate from everybody else.
Nice.
So all those clips you see, you're not going to get, but yeah, I'll play that at some point. I'll get it together. So
another piece of the offensive line conversation that we should touch on, because he posted a video which is what the people want. He is making good progress in his rehab. That's Jonah Williams, who is expected to be back for mandatory minicamp next week. Let's talk about his progress coming up next.
Jonah, 605-pound squat rack, Williams. That's what that dude was squatting. He posted it on social media on his story. I believe it was on Monday evening when he did that. And you might say, 600 pounds, that's nothing. Well, here's why I think it's relevant for a few reasons. And I posted the video at allbengals.com because it's probably going to be gone from his story by the time this is out. His knee, obviously surgically repaired, all of those things. Not reconstruction. It's not as serious, nothing like that. But hopefully it prevents that kneecap from popping back out like it did last year. And I went back and watched a video he posted on April 24th, and he was squatting 500 pounds 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to now, it's 605 pounds. And I think it's clear he's putting in the work. He's getting stronger. He's dedicated. Even though we don't see it, we're not seeing him take pass sets and work on his fundamentals and working on that right side. He's clearly making progress. And so we'll see if he shows up next week. I expect him to. Rumor has it that he will, but until he does, he hasn't. But if he does show up, I expect him to look good and be in pretty good shape, or really good shape considering, he's coming back from a knee surgery earlier this year.
Yeah, he's been rehabbing. He's been working with a trainer named Derek Samuel. His Instagram also has some clips of Jonah as he's gone through his rehab process. Seems like he's doing freak athlete rehab stuff, like doing a speed ladder 5 weeks out of his surgery. And it wasn't, it wasn't like an ACL reconstruction. You're right about that. But what he had was a medial patellofemoral ligament reconstruction. It's the ligament that holds the kneecap in place, is my understanding of the surgery he had. So he did have a reconstructive surgery, not as major as like what LC went through, for example, or Joe Burrow or Carson Palmer or Chidobe Awuzie, not like an ACL full knee reconstruction kind of thing. But I think that he's doing pretty well with his rehab. It is my takeaway from looking at the Instagram post and kind of what some other physical therapists said about his rehab and his protocol. Another physical therapist called it an accelerated protocol. Hasn't seen somebody looking as good as Jonah did after 5 weeks. And this was a few months ago now that he was working on that. Typically a 12-week rehab from what I understand about this surgery as well. So we're well past that. And so for a football player, maybe a little bit more going into it, a little bit more force on the knees than a normal person obviously has to deal with, but should be good if we're talking about minicamp next week. That's a solid 20 plus weeks out from the surgery.
Yep. I think it's going to be a fun time watching because there are so many people that are low on Jonah because of his trade request, which by the way is not still there. It's not like he's like, hey, trade me still. Like, I think he kind of knows, like, all right, this is it. They're not trading me. I'm going to have to play right tackle, and that's it. Now, would he welcome the idea of playing left tackle elsewhere? Probably, but he's familiar with left tackle, so I get it. That said, I would be really surprised if Jonah Williams, assuming health, which is a big assumption, I get, but assuming he's healthy, I'd be surprised if he wasn't the starting right tackle. And I know we haven't seen him, but that changes if we see him next week. And he goes through all the right tackle drills and looks fine. And that's what I expect to see next week too.
Yeah, we'll see if it's a rotation. We'll see if he needs to work on rehab stuff when he's back in the facility. I assume the first thing they'll have to do is evaluate where he's at, right? Because they
and they'll
probably
and that's actually a good point. I bet they would have him just do rehab stuff next week. They
That's
don't need
very
him to
possible.
go through the drills, because you're right, they're not facing defenses.
Mhm.
So he can get just as much work off to the side, and then they avoid, especially the days. Well, the media will be there every day next week during minicamp. So yeah, I think it'll be rehab field. Hey, Nick Cosgray, you got our boy Jonah. Get him right.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out if he's there or not. He'll probably be there, and that might be it. Or maybe he's not in need of rehab. I guess we don't know that for sure. Seems like he's still working with the physical therapist, like that we were just mentioning. He referenced the guy's account in the story he posted when he was doing the 605-pound squat, which you said that like it wasn't much weight, James. You're like 605-pound squat. Yeah, that's a lot of weight.
It is a lot of weight, but I think some people just assume offensive linemen, they squat, huge numbers, and some do.
Mm-hmm.
But for a guy coming off of a knee surgery, that's a hell of a lot of weight. And yeah, I mean, I've never gotten. We're not going to get into my squat game, but it's not that.
That's
I'll
a
bench
lot of
600 pounds. I'll bench 600 pounds, but I won't squat.
You'll bench it, but you can't squat it.
Hey, benching's always came easier than those type of squats. He also doesn't go. I don't know. My squats are different. So.
It was a 5 degrees past 90 degree.
Yeah,
is what
I go lower.
5 degrees past parallel.
But athletes like that, like offensive linemen, don't necessarily need to go lower. Like that's the thing, is you don't want to.
Well, it's also like a rehab thing.
Yeah,
that is probably very controlled. Anyway, we'll see what Jonah Williams does next week. That is something that's going to be fun to watch. As long as he's ready to go for training camp, and really like week 2 of training camp, when they start getting into some contact stuff, then the competition's on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he'll be able to do everything he needs to do to compete. LC's rehab also going to be very interesting to watch. How ahead of schedule, if ahead of schedule is he? Despite what he went through last year, these guys are elite athletes. Even, and you said this, I think, in our last episode, Jim, even Orlando Brown, who didn't test like an elite athlete for his size, compared to you listening to this episode, compared to me recording this episode, is an elite athlete. So these guys do have that gear in them when it comes to rehab. So going to be really interesting to see how LC is healing up when training camp rolls around as well, to see if he gets into the mix, if he's able to actually get in and compete and doesn't have to continue doing rehab work at that point in time.
Hope so. Would love it. That would be best case scenario, is you have a competition between guys that are proven in this league, even if they might not be proven at right tackle like Jonah. And yeah, I think that's why Jackson Carman, hopefully you're making quite an impression, my man, because those other 2 guys are coming, and both have established themselves in the league, even if some people are forgetting what Jonah's done and what he did in 2020 and 2021.
If those guys are healthy and Jackson Carman wins the job,
0 chance.
I would be very bullish on Jackson Carman this year.
0 chance. Happened. I'm just letting you know.
That's what I'm saying. If that happens,
if they're both healthy, that is like I could see him, like Jonah getting traded and Jackson finding a way to beat out Lyle because Lyle's still hobbled and not the same. Like we saw that with Trey Hopkins a few years ago. It's hard to get back and beat that dude.
Yeah.
So
that's all I'm saying is like, if they're healthy and he won the job, he would be playing out of this world. And that would be
good for him. Yeah, that'd be great
for him. Right.
It's also
and great for Joe Burrow. But yeah, I agree with you. Not very likely.
That'd be like if Jackson Kirkland can be an all-pro as a rookie undrafted,
That's right.
It might not be that high, but it's close. It's close. Sorry, Jackson Carman.
That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. We've got one more episode this week. Like I mentioned at the top of the show and in our earlier episode this week, we're in off-season mode at the moment. But if anything does break in the meantime, we're currently on a 3-episode-a-week schedule. We will have you covered with the extra episodes as needed if it's big enough news. So until next time, Bengals fans, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Maybe we'll have a little bit extra for you for minicamp next week. We'll see. We'll see how the schedule goes. We'll see what happens. Thanks for listening. Hoo day, and have a good one.